That's where they make their money.
They have to pay them for their labor, right?
Yeah, so they don't want sentence reform. They want the longest sentence and the harshest sentence, the sentence for the most insignificant crime, because that's where they make their money.
Yeah, it always strikes me that's kind of what Hitler did, eh? He revived the economy by enslaving people, because if you enslave someone, you don't have to pay them very much for their labor. I've even heard of some prisons in Pennsylvania where they make the prisoners pay rent for their cells, and then they buy toilet paper and soap, and so the pittance that they get given just goes back into the system anyway. And that strikes me as a quasi form of a fascist state almost, or a fascist policy.
And they're milking the prisoners that have families, poor families.
Yeah.
For having to sacrifice for a loved one who's in prison.
Yeah, no, it's
pitiful.
No, it's pitiful.
But, well, I think the most important thing is to take the military expenditures out, and even without regard to the money, it has to be done. I mean, it's not the money; it's the psychology of spending all that for superior capacity for violence, to bully people, so you can exploit them, kill people, so you can take over.
Yeah, I know in Britain one of my friends says that the privatisation process is going on right now. He just came to Canada and he was saying how, I won't work in a private prison because in the public prisons, it's public service, they'll hire 10, 12, 15 guards in one section, but he says the private prisons, they'll just have 3 people or 2 people, and like you said, the electric, I found that, very compelling when you were saying that.
The labor unions are part of it because, they in the public they get strong unions and they can, they want more members.
Yeah.
More jobs.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah, so we were discussing yesterday about Barack Obama and at what point would you say perhaps you're disappointed with him? How far would he have to go before you said you kind of resented him coming to power or?
No, I was very pleased that he was elected.
Mm.
More than pleased. I was, it would have been impossible for me to be otherwise, just because he's black, which is perhaps a form of racism itself. But he's also a unique president. He's had experiences that no president's had anything like. An experience that we, on subjects we need to address. He knows third world poverty. We've got to address third world poverty. Mm. He's emotional about third world poverty. He's not a very emotional man, but he's emotional about it because he's lived in it himself. He knows his grandmother still lives in it. He suffers from it. And he knows Islam. His best buddies there, and he saw the discipline in the families and the kindness of the families.
Yeah.
In spite of dire poverty.
Yeah.
I mean, they had. Imagine a kid from public schools in Hawaii being thrown into poverty in Indonesia because his mother had married a stepfather who was a army man, and they had no money, had no real income.
Yeah.
They had no car. They couldn't send him to any school except the public schools available. He had to pick up on the language, and no flush toilet, no running water.
Yeah.
And everybody Muslim.
Yeah, so he had that experience. He actually knows Muslims are human beings, and
yeah, you
that's a big difference. Eh?
It's a time too that you form.
Yeah.
At least most people do. It's your first real relationships with people outside the family, from 6 to 12.
Yeah.
And they're your best buddies. You do anything for your best buddies,
Yeah.
You grew up. You had your growing up experience together. You don't forget them. And you can't take that out of him.
What about the wars? People would say, well, maybe he cares about poverty, but he's creating poverty because he's the drones that go into Pakistan and into Afghanistan and drop bombs on villages. Like that he's creating poverty, and he's compounding. He's continuing the 9/11 wars, the Bush wars. Like, what would you say to people who say that?
Well, I'd say that it's a gross misunderstanding of reality to think that the president can blow a whistle and everybody skates the other way.
Yeah.
The power of the president is extremely limited. You look at all the problems coming out of the woodwork against Obama. I mean, the paralysis in the Congress. And, he took on health care, which was a fight that had been going on for a long time, but the very fight showed stubbornness and intransigence of the real power in the country,
Yeah.
the economic power of the country,
Yeah.
the concentrated power in the economy. Johnson was, I'm not sure we've ever had a president that understood the Congress and could manipulate it like he could. But he happened to come along at a time when the mood of the country was all for it. The people were all
Yeah.
for it. It was the 60s and whatever the chemistry of the time was. So he could dream of ending poverty,
He wanted the Great Society, right?
with the Great Society. And he made he did make enormous changes. I mean, he tripled expenditure for health care in less than 4 years.
Yeah.
He doubled federal expenditures for education in no time. And he was able to do it at the same time that the war in Vietnam was escalating.
Yeah, such a contradiction, eh?
The cost was escalating. But Obama's ability to, he was a loner in the Senate for any number of reasons, not the least of which being he's the only black person around here, except the butler.
Yeah, it's huge, yeah.
But also he was a kid, comparatively. I mean, he just in Chicago and nobody knew him. But his votes were very good.
Oh, the things he voted for.
It's a remarkable thing that is very unlikely to ever happen again, and that is that the senator with the most liberal voting record, and the best voting record on military matters, and the war. He voted consistently on the war. He was against the Iraq resolution, and he gets elected president. He gets nominated the Democratic Party and gets elected president, which is remarkable. But then power ganged up on him, as did prejudice. A lot of his obstacles were created by racism. The things that worry me most are the test of his humaneness and his compassion, because you could see how he got trapped in Afghanistan, because politically he had to show that he wasn't a softie. He wasn't going to give the country up to enemies and they would take us over.
Yeah.
So he could say, yeah, we've got a real case in Afghanistan because of 9/11. That was his argument. It was going into Afghanistan was justified because that is to get
Al Qaeda. Yeah.
Because the theory was that Al Qaeda was responsible, and that's justified in law. He knows law. I mean, the guy was president of the Harvard Law Review.
He's a constitutional expert, isn't he? I heard of that.
Well, he taught at my law school at the University of Chicago law school, but his brilliance is shown by the fact that the Harvard Law School brings in most of the potentially best law students in the country.
Yeah.
I mean, if the Supreme Court today is comprised, which is an outrage, comprised entirely of Harvard and Yale.
Oh wow.
Law school graduates, unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of seems a bit too much of a monopoly.
How absurd things are. But here he comes in, he's a black kid, he doesn't have any money or background.